Now, if there's one thing that I personally get abnormally nervous about, and maybe you do as well, and it was highlighted for me quite a bit on this past week of vacation going to Drumheller, is that some would say that I feel nervous, maybe even afraid of heights. We took our children to, some of you have been there, to the hoodoos, these rock structures in the Drumheller area that look fantastic to climb up. And they're sort of based on the pit of Drumheller. So there's this mountainside cliff that goes up with all these wonderful rock formations. And if you don't know, I have 3 young boys. So when you start at the bottom of this structure, the first thing that 3 young boys have to do is try and get up to the highest spot they can where the biggest drop-off is, right? So, and myself having to chase them and keep up to them and try to, not die myself, and also encourage them not to die off the cliff. But it just highlighted my uncomfortability with heights. Like, if I go up to an edge, I will feel nervous, even if there is a railing there. I want to show you a few bridges around the world that have become famous for how unsafe they look. This first one, would you walk across it? This is the Langkawi Sky Bridge in Malaysia. It's 400 feet above the ground. It has been closed several times for maintenance and delayed reopening. That structure going up is angled, which just makes it way more fun to walk across. But don't worry, if you're worried about walking across it, in this next slide you can see they have installed a piece of glass in the floor so that you can make sure that angled metal is still at the right angle, right? That's what they put that there for. I wouldn't want to walk across this bridge. This is in Malaysia. This next bridge, it takes us to Switzerland. This one is 3,000 meters above the ground, and it has a backdrop of the Swiss Alps, so that's wonderful / terrifying. And I don't know if I'd walk across this, because cold never caused any issues for metal, right? Never caused nothing metal to break. No, this is one that I definitely wouldn't want to walk across. Now, this next bridge is very famous, going to Pakistan, the Husseini Bridge. It's terrifying for a few different reasons. First of all, you have multiple holes along the wood slats that you can fall through, and you drop about 100 feet down to the river if you fall. Secondly, the bridge, which is obviously poorly maintained, loves to swing in the wind as you are going across. And thirdly, to just boost your confidence or lack of confidence in the structure, as you're going across, you can see to the right the previous bridge that somebody decided they were a bit too heavy for it as they were going across, and it fell apart. But one gentleman has found a way to get across this safely. This is how you get it. You have to stand above the wood slats. That's how you get across it safely. That's his version of making it safer. But maybe walking across a bridge isn't something that would cause you nerves or to be afraid. Maybe it's driving even across something that's high up. If you look at this next bridge built in Japan, this is the Ashima Bridge, and it's, obviously quite famous for looking the way it is. Yeah. Now, things that don't look secure, that don't look safe, aren't something most of us would probably run towards. Things that we won't want to put our weight down on that step or drive across that bridge that looks like that. We like things to have a sense of some level of security to them. So I ask you this morning, what makes you feel secure? What makes you feel secure? Maybe you lean into having a certain amount of money in your bank account or your investments for a level of security. Maybe it's having a certain role or responsibility in your work or community or in your family life, and that gives you a sense of validity and security. Maybe it's looking a certain way or being part of a certain friend group or having a few close friends, and that gives you a sense of security. We build these attachments quickly and cling to them almost ferociously, like a baby clinging to their soother or a child to their favorite stuffed animal. And one of the things that makes me feel very secure is clarity. When things are clear, when I know what's to happen next, when the next decision is, I feel secure. And conversely, the lack of clarity, ambiguity, is what causes me to feel insecure. And maybe that is the same as the true for you. When there isn't clarity, when it is elusive, you feel less secure. Clarity brings peace when you have a decision to make around work or where to travel in the midst of trying to make it back to your home, or if you have a decision around what university to attend, or should I stay in this job, or should I stay in this friendship, or should I date that person, or should I not date that person? If there isn't clarity around it, it can breed and just promote a feeling of insecurity. So when clarity is elusive, insecurity rises. But there is one thing that when clarity eludes us that can help, can be an antidote towards that and our stress and our panic levels. When clarity is elusive and we want security, the thing that is an antidote towards it is trust. To trust deeply. And that's what we're going to be looking at today as we enter into one of our Psalms that we've been preaching through over the summer here, of how the people of God trusted in the face where clarity wasn't there, when security wasn't there. We've been in a sermon series called Songs for the Road, and we've been looking at these different songs, these psalms from the Old Testament that the people of God would sing. As 3 times a year, they would travel up to Jerusalem, to Mount Zion, as God commanded them to gather there 3 times a year for certain events, to worship Him, remember their identity, that He is good, that they are a rescued people, that He is one that provides for them. And they would sing these different songs as they went there, reminding themselves of who God is, who they are, their purpose, their identity. And so the one we're looking at today is talking about trust and how they move forward despite the lack of clarity, despite the lack of what's next, and where they find their security in. We're looking at Psalm 125. We'll read it all the way through, and then we'll walk through it verse by verse a bit. It says this, it begins with this: "Those who trust in the Lord are as secure as Mount Zion. They will not be defeated, but endure forever. Just as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds His people, both now and forever. The wicked will not rule the land of the godly, for then the godly might be tempted to do wrong. O Lord, do good to those who are good, whose hearts are in tune with you. But banish those who turn to crooked ways, O Lord. Take them away with those who do evil. May Israel have peace." Just a short 5 verses, this psalm, and we don't know the author of it. We do have some clues around what type of season of life it was written in with the people of God. It was definitely a psalm where the people of God were either living in the promised land or had lived in the promised land, and it was likely written during a season when one of the empires surrounding them was in control, was pushing down on them. We don't know if it was the Assyrians or the Babylonians, different people who at different times ruled over the Middle East. But the first verse gives us an option that's better than clarity for when we're looking for security. We read it in verse 1, "Those who trust in the Lord are as secure as Mount Zion. They will not be defeated." Trust. And why does trust matter? Because while clarity is wonderful and good, it's wonderful when we have, okay, this is the way we should go, or this is what we should decide, or this is what needs to happen in myself or those around me, that can be elusive. So clarity isn't always an option. But what is always an option is trust, of what you're going to put your trust in. And notice that it does not say, "The Lord is secure," like Mount Zion. Yes, Lord is secure. He is immovable. He is all-powerful. But it's the people who trust that are secure, like Mount Zion. The people who trust. And why does trust correlate to Mount Zion? Well, Mount Zion in the Old Testament was the place where God had focused His presence. This is where His presence dwelt among His people in the temple, and they centered all of their lives around it. And this is how He communicated to them His goodness, His holiness, His love. So it's correlating that those who trust in God are like the mountain where God dwells. In other words, where Christ draws near to those who trust Him, they are coming to His presence. They are like Mount Zion. Our trust in God is better than clarity. It helps us move forward with the insecurities of life, making us immovable like Mount Zion. Even when the people of God were conquered and taken out of the land into the east, Mount Zion remained immovable. Trust was still an option. Next week, you'll hear from a friend of mine, again, preaching through one of these Psalms. And he is someone, every time I talk with him, every time I'm with him, I'm just inspired with how much he trusts God beyond the many, many challenges that he faces in his life and his situations. So I invite you to come back next week if you want to hear from my friend around how he trusts God in the midst of his challenges. But this psalmist continues down into verse 2. It says, just as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people both now and forever. Some of you have been to Jerusalem. Some of you have been on top of Mount Zion. I've been there once, and it is surrounded by other hills, which gave them a tactical advantage. It gave them the ability to see enemies coming easily from their highest point. And it's correlating that just as the mountains surround it, the Lord is surrounding those who trust him. There's a protection element there. That his security is not just that we are in his presence, that he is protecting us, surrounding us, going before us, behind us, all around. Some of you have been there. I haven't had the chance to be there, but some of you have traveled to China and seen the Great Wall of China. Hands up if any of you have been there. Yeah, only on this side of the room. You guys need to get out more, okay? This wall is an incredible structure. It's 22,000 kilometers in total. Averaging 25 feet in height. Some sections are 46. It's about 13 to 16 feet wide. Just incredible structure. And it was designed to protect from invaders. It didn't always work. Genghis Khan in 11th, 12th century time, his army breached the wall a number of times. It took 5 years of his constant attacking and getting one garrison over to his side, but he did make it through. Centuries later, in 1644, the Manchu people, though, got through the wall very easily. They simply walked through this gate in the next slide. How they got through, though, was they had bribed a general named Wu Sangui to switch sides and open the gates for them. And it took 3 days, legend has it, that for the Manchu army to walk through this gate. Like it was no small raiding party that was coming through. And what this reminds us of is that no matter how secure and big and large the walls are, our security only is as good as the people we've entrusted to guard it, to protect it. The security is found in who we've trusted to protect us, to guard us. Psalm 2 has a prophetic word around who we trust. It says in Psalm verse 2, verse 6, the Lord declares, I have placed my chosen king on the throne in Jerusalem on my holy mountain, on Mount Zion. That is where the chosen king will be. And this is speaking to the very presence of God, Jesus Christ, who rode to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday as king, went to Mount Zion. This is the one that we trust. This is the only one worthy of our trust. Our security in life is not based on walls or fortresses or bank accounts or roles and positions, but on whom our trust is placed in. Our trust is placed in the very presence of Jesus. And that is the only one worthy of it. Trust in God lifts you above the insecurities of life, the things that would constantly cause you to worry, to set in, to panic, to give up, to look for hopelessness, to look for despair. When clarity is gone, trust is the only thing that can lift you above that. Trust in his presence, in his goodness, his love, and his plan. The protection that the psalmist talks about goes even beyond just that it's a good protection, but it's facing off against the evils of the day. It says this down in verse 3, the wicked will not rule the land of the godly, for then the godly might be tempted to do wrong. O Lord, do good to those who are good and whose hearts are in tune with you, but banish those who turn to crooked ways, O Lord. Take them away with those who do evil. May Israel have peace. This is a reminder and a plea that evil will not rule forever. That the ways of the wicked will not last. The psalmist was probably writing under wicked rulers, whether Syrian or Babylonians, we don't know. But the promise of God that evil will not win. And it's those who live under this rule could be tempted to follow the ways of that direction. You can imagine with me for a moment one of the moments in Jesus' life that relates to this. In Luke chapter 2, when he was 12 years old, one of the only stories we have, the only story we have of Jesus between birth and his adult life, of him going to Jerusalem, going to Mount Zion for one of these appointed festivals, one of the three, with his family and extended family, and going there and singing these types of songs. We read about it in Luke 2, where he says every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. When Jesus was 12 years old, they attended the festival as usual. So one of these exact moments where Jesus is going up to Jerusalem, singing these songs for one of the times to worship God together. And as they get there, you can imagine two things happening. They're singing this song. They see Jerusalem, this highest point in the area, this Mount Zion where the presence of God dwelt. And they would see all the surrounding hills around it. And just first they would go, yes, this is where our trust is secure. We are like Mount Zion. Yes, we are surrounded by the hills just as God surrounds us. That reality would be very present to them. But the second thing they would see as they sang this psalm, as they came up to where the Temple Mount is, to where the presence of God dwelt, is they would see Fortress Antonia. This next slide, the Roman headquarters, it's built right next to the temple. This painful reminder that a strong and ruthless empire was ruling over them at all times. It did not care for the ways of God or the worship of him. Praying, the wicked will not rule the land of the godly. We live in similar times where we have the freedom to gather together, to express our trust, to worship God together. But there is empires of the world or influences that would want to drag us in different directions and not God's design for life. It can be a daily battle to express trust in God, that his ways are good, that he has a plan worth following, that he is loving and gracious towards us, that he is the one that is where our security is found. You remember that bridge, the Ashima Bridge up there, the one that was in Japan? Well, it looks incredibly dangerous and nothing I would ever want to drive across or walk across. It only looks this way if you photograph it from a faraway distance at this certain angle. If you get, on this next slide, if you get a side angle and you get up close, you'll notice it's not as steep. It's actually about 5%. So for those of you who are into roads or trucking, it's not that steep. Likewise, when you stay close to the presence of God, putting your trust in him, the insecure feeling is able to diminish. You're able to be like that immovable Mount Zion found in Jerusalem. That is where your security is. Into the New Testament, Mount Zion represents more than just a mountain. It represents God's spiritual kingdom that you've come into through the presence of Jesus Christ. The author of Hebrews says it this way: you have not come to a physical mountain, to a place of flaming fire, darkness, gloom, and whirlwind, as the Israelites did at Mount Sinai. No, you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to the countless thousands of angels in joyful gathering. You have come to the assembly of God's firstborn children, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God himself, who is the judge over all things. You have come to the spirits of the righteous ones in heaven, who have now been made perfect. You have come to Jesus, the one who mediates the new covenant, the new promise between God and people, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks forgiveness instead of crying out for vengeance like the blood of Abel. It's in the presence of Jesus that we trust, that makes us secure, makes us like this immovable Mount Zion. And in doing so, we, like the people of God, are drawing close to his presence. Because trust in God lifts you above the insecurities of life, gives you an anchor, gives you a footing, gives you something to cling to. We become immovable and secure in his presence. And if you are longing for that security today, if you have never reached for the presence of Jesus, I'm going to invite you to do so today. There's no better day to do so. That through his forgiveness on the cross for our sin, your sin, my sin, there is a security that goes even beyond the grave. That you'll live with him forevermore. have been following Jesus since I was 14 years old, and I have zero regrets around doing so. He is always good. He was always there. He is always here. He has always shown me purpose and a design for living. Even when I feel like clarity is gone and there's evil all around me and I don't know what to do, there's the option to trust him, to find security in his presence. So if that's you, I invite you to embrace him today. As we close in prayer, there'll be a prayer up on the screen. You can pray this in your heart and mind as we close. Jesus, please forgive me of my sin. Please help me to trust in you. I will live with you in the joy of your presence. Amen. Please stand as we close in worshiping him together.